Hi guys, good evening. So it's Thursday night. I know that you're all looking forward for the upcoming weekend and ayun na naman tayo, meron na naman tayong background noise na nangyayari. We're here in a coffee shop in Starbucks. I hope that they're all okay, working all fine in your own homes. Meron tayong, ilan na ba yung ano natin, mga participants right now? So meron tayong at least 20 participants, no? And I hope that you're looking forward for another learning session tonight. We're gonna be talking about misinformation and disinformation in the context of COVID. Kasi alam natin yung nangyayari ngayon, di ba? COVID is the new fertile ground for fake news and disinformation. Actually, mas naglipa na nga siya. I want you guys to remember that fake news travels 6 times faster than truthful news, according to a study by BBC on Twitter. And applicable yan sa other social media platforms. It's because of the context of virality and all that. So, when COVID happened, ang context kasi nun, nag-worsen siya because people are talking about um, parang may collapse ng institutions, may mga, it's easy to prey on public fear and things like that. So maraming requirements that makes it easier for fake news to happen, to travel even faster than, like the 6 times speed I was talking about. And that's exactly what's gonna be the topic for tonight. Explore natin yung different facets of fake news at the time of the pandemic, bakit worse siya at this time, on a principle level, why are people preying on public fear? Ano yung propaganda na ina-advance nila? And on a practical level, is fake news lethal? Alam yung mga practical effects like, okay, let's assume that fake news is existent. Ano yung mga ramifications niyan? Ano yung extent of effects that we actually feel as a collective society and community. So, yun yung mga pag-uusapan natin tonight. And our speaker for tonight, okay? So, her name is Mara Barbara Nanaman. Mara has a communication degree and a master's in English language studies. She has contributed articles to the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Business World, and most recently, Rappler. She's currently the head of the secondary English department in National High Jakarta School, which is an international school in Jakarta, Indonesia, where she has been based for 8 years. NH follows the Cambridge International Curriculum, and one of the courses is an A level program called Global Perspectives and Research. Aside from that, Mara also teaches the course to 11th and 12th grades with the goal of equipping them with the skills to become effective researchers and as active and responsible users of information. So, without further ado, let's start off this conversation about COVID-related misinformation. Let's all welcome my debate coach, Mara Barbara Nanaman.
Thank you, Gab. Sorry kung medyo fake news yung totoong itsura ko dun sa picture. Okay, so hi guys. This is such a great opportunity for me to be here. Thank you, Gab, for inviting me. I've seen the previous talk here, and I think that this is a really good opportunity for us to inform ourselves, myself included, no, in preparing for this talk. Of course, I had to do a lot of research, and I learned a lot, and it's really very important, especially at this time of pandemic, but also at this time of disinfodemic, which we're going to be talking a lot about today, that we really take, effort, that extra mile, really, to equip ourselves with more information, because we not only need to inoculate or vaccinate ourselves against the virus, COVID, pero actually kailangan din natin ng mind inoculation, which means na kailangan maprotektahan din natin yung utak natin, yung pag-iisip natin, because of all this information, a lot of it false and therefore damaging that we're receiving at this time of pandemic. So by the way, first of all, I hope you don't mind my background. This is the background that I usually have when I teach. So I figured, might as well just use it. It's preferable to my actual real background anyway. And also I will be code switching from English to Filipino. So if there's anybody here na who prefers that I just speak in straight English, please just message me, and I'll be glad to accommodate that. So with no further ado, I think we should get started. Um, Next slide, please. All right. So first of all, we need to be aware of like the definitions of the terms that we'll be using a lot during this talk. So the first one is misinformation. We have disinformation, and of course we have pandemic, which of course everybody knows. No, so what is misinformation, and obviously what is the difference with disinformation? So misinformation is false information that is spread regardless if there is an intent to mislead or not. So meron talagang, so it's talking about information that is not 100% true, that is framed in a way that it becomes misleading. Partial truths can actually be as damaging as complete lies. And so when this is spread, not necessarily with the intent to fool anybody or to trick anybody, that is called misinformation. And then if we have disinformation, ito naman, it's false information that is deliberately spread with the intent, with malicious intent. So with the intent talaga to trick people, to have people form maybe an opinion about about something, or for them to have to act in a certain way. So may ano talaga to, may malicious intent. So potentially it's obviously more dangerous than just misinformation. And of course, pandemic, this is when a disease is so prevalent such that it's spread on a global scale, which this pandemic that we're in right now, as we all know, of course, it's been the only thing that's been, kind of taking over our lives in the last, what now, 9 months. It's completely unprecedented. But also, one of the things really that we need to understand about this pandemic is that, again, COVID is not the only danger that we're facing. And I don't want to be alarmist. And the goal of this is certainly not to add to your stress or to your worry or to your anxiety, but it's really hopefully to help empower you with, with this thing that we're dealing with right now, which is this prevalence of misinformation and disinformation. So today we're going to talk about what are the drivers, the causes, bakit nga ba masyadong prevalent or mas naging prevalent yung spread ng mga misinformation and disinformation at this time, and what are the effects, and of course, lastly, how do we stop it, or at the very least not contribute to it. Next slide. Okay. So Gab told you about my background earlier. So that's my background. Next slide. All right. So again, why have disinformation and misinformation become as prevalent as the COVID at this time of pandemic? Bakit nga ba? Diba? So yun nga, isa to sa bagay na kailangan mas mas vigilant tayo about. We're quite vigilant now, or at least I hope you all are quite vigilant about our health and protecting ourselves with regards to the COVID virus, and hopefully protecting other people as well. So wearing mask, wearing face mask, limiting our ventures into the outside world if we can. I understand that not everybody's able to, maintaining social distancing. So we know this, right? But the question now becomes, ano naman yung dapat nating gawin to combat the effects of disinformation and misinformation, right? And what is it really, and how does it happen? Next slide. All right, so in the words of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, our enemy is also the growing surge of misinformation during this crisis. And they actually were the ones who coined the term disinfodemic. And it's, this is, I think, a very simple but very powerful statement. If information is empowering, then disinformation is disempowering. And I'm sure, I cannot overemphasize this. Hindi predated. Disinformation didn't just come about because of during the pandemic. Obviously, it predates the pandemic. It's been in existence. But the surge, there was a surge, it worsened during this time. And yes, it's disempowering, but more so, there are real life-threatening effects from and disinformation. When we receive incorrect, false, or misleading information about COVID and what it really is about and what we should do about it, unfortunately, lives have been lost and can be lost if this continues, right? So it's very dangerous, especially at the time of pandemic. Next. So by the way pala, sorry sa mga who finds this picture, offensive. I would say look away, you don't have to look at it, you don't have to stare at it, but I'm sure this is not an altogether unfamiliar photo, right? So just very quickly in the Zoom chat, would anybody like to tell me anything about this photo? What do you remember, or what do you know about this photo? Also, in a word, can you tell me if the how this was broadcasted in the media? Was this part of like fake news, or totoo ba talaga tong story na attached to this photo? Reason nga daw to ng COVID. Ito yung pinakapaniki, guys, na na may kasalanan sa COVID, cause ng COVID. Yes, thank you, Rahim. Yun nga. So ito yung this photo, or this set of photos. Actually, these are actually stills from a video that was spread around the start of this year, when it was, I think we can go to the next slide. All right, so that photo actually, or those set of stills from a video that was spread around earlier this year, when it became quite widespread in the news that the cause, or there are theories that the coronavirus is actually from exotic animals, specifically bats, and that Wuhan, the wet market in Wuhan, is most likely the source of the virus. So dun yung pinaka-outbreak, diba? Alam naman natin. So that part is true. So that photo actually was spread around with the story na supposedly, yun nga, itong bat soup na to, na supposedly kinakain sa Wuhan, yung pinaka-cause ng pandemic. So let's just clarify, this has been debunked, although I feel like there's still a lot of people who still believe that this is true. That video and that woman, the lady that we see there, actually is a Chinese influencer. And that video was actually taken in 2016 when she went to Micronesia. She went on a travel tour there, and apparently one of the local cuisine is bat. And yeah, she took a video and she posted it in her Chinese social media account. And suddenly, 4 years later, because of the pandemic, it was spread around. And as you can imagine, of course, sobrang grabe yung naging backlash sa kanya. She received a lot of death threats. People were wishing her death, saying, you should die, this is your fault. Basically like tagging her as like a perpetrator behind, the spread of this virus, which is obviously unfair for the lady. And dare I say unfair for the bats. I don't know if I'm going to receive flack for that. But as far as scientists are actually concerned, yes, it's highly, highly likely that bats were the cause or the source of the coronavirus, but they were not really able to say for certain because they were not able to gather samples from Wuhan at that time. And so the theory now is that it came from bat or pangolins, but that most likely there was an intermediary between the exotic animals and humans, meaning posibleng may na-transfer pa siya to another animal, let's say a pig, before it was transferred to humans. And so this story actually is a very good example, I think, of how, we have this expression, it's spread like wildfire. And it very did spread like wildfire. And like I said, a lady actually received a lot of death threats because of this. But there's other things I think that spread as well. So there's like xenophobia, there's racism that was highlighted, race was attached to it, and potential abuse towards animals as well. So there are real, widespread consequences when, stories like this are, dare I say, irresponsibly spread, really. And so I think this is a good kind of starting point for today's discussion. Next slide. By the way, if you have any questions at any point, please, feel free to ask questions I'm not sure if you can say them verbally, but if not, you can go ahead and type them in the chat. So what why is okay, thank you. So you can go ahead and unmute if you want to ask questions. So why is mis and disinformation prevalent at the time of pandemic? So we have four reasons here, and this is not an exhaustive list, which means pwedeng may iba pang mga reasons, diba? So pero pag-uusapan natin tonight is because of this culture of sharing for shock value or sensationalism. We have the devolution of the gatekeeper role. We have echo chambers and confirmation bias, and we also have the reliance on rule of thumb, right? So let's go ahead and talk about the first one. Next slide, please. All right, so ito siya. This was from an Israeli newspaper, well, online paper. Supposedly, kasi this is true. Israel at that time, and this was in March of this year, they had the lowest death rates in the world. This is true. That part was true. But the reason that was used supposedly why they had the lowest rate at that point in time was because they applied vertical lockdown, wherein they only prevented the elderly from going out. So it was like a vertical lockdown, they called it, they said, wherein the younger people were allowed to, is that right? The younger people were allowed to go out, but the elderly were just allowed to stay in. And so this is dangerous, right? Because this could be basis for policy. Well, I'm not sure if governments actually did act on this and use it as basis for their actual lockdown policies. But people might think, oh, okay, so if Israel did that and it worked for them, then maybe it's fine. I'm not, however the age bracket for elderly is, I don't fall in that bracket. Therefore, I can just go out and and feel safe doing that and not feel like I'm endangering other people. And of course, that is false and dangerous. But unfortunately, this was shared at least 100 times, at least hundreds of times before it was actually fact checked and debunked. So obviously, there's an obvious danger there. Next slide. Okay, so sharing for shock value. So there we have something which is called sensationalism or sensationalist journalism. So usually it's associated with the practice of journalists themselves creating headlines or publishing news, not necessarily to inform, not necessarily because they think it's information that people need to know, but because it's information that is interesting, shocking, and therefore people will, subscribe to it, click it, open it. So ito yung parang under the family of like clickbait, for example, yung ganon. So unfortunately for this, when that is kind of like as a motivation, it's quite dangerous. No, so this isn't limited to to journalists anymore, because everybody now actually, number one, has the power to spread information themselves, and number two, create content themselves. So content creation is no longer the exclusive domain of journalists. Today, just about anybody can create and put content out there, whether it's in the form of like a YouTube video or a post on Facebook or a tweet on Twitter or a blog post. Everybody can create posts, right? And anybody can have this motivation wherein they would just want to share information just because it's shocking, it's interesting, it will trigger, di ba? Ito yung mga words na medyo ano na siya, parang gamit na siya in parang everyday netizen discussions, like, oh, I'm triggered, ganyan, or that's so clickbaity yung ganun. So unfortunately, masyado na siyang naging commonplace practice wherein we see something, oh, it's interesting, I want to spread this, I want to share this, maybe to just my 5 friends in our group or maybe to all of my friends in Facebook. Pero yun lang yung pinaka-motivation natin kasi interesting siya, shocking siya. I think they'll get a laugh out of it. I think we'll get a gasp out of it, like, oh, really? That's the girl who ate the bat soup na contribute or maybe caused this whole thing. And so obviously that in itself is dangerous, right? So if that's like your only standard, or if yan yung pinaka standard mo na parang nag-share ka ng something kasi it'll trigger a reaction, to some extent that can be a bit irresponsible, diba? So we don't want to encourage that. This is not to say that we shouldn't spread information that is interesting or shocking. The fact that it's interesting or shocking in itself is not wrong, I think. What's wrong is itong parang practice na yun lang yung standard. Parang dahil interesting siya, dahil shocking siya, without making an extra kind of effort to make sure that it's true or that it's factual, we go ahead and share it. Therein lies, I think, the, dare I say, the irresponsibility. Kasi we didn't try to make sure that it's true, right? Next slide. So speaking of sensationalism, unfortunately we live in a time, like I said before, wherein just about anybody has the ability to put content out there, and unfortunately a lot of the people uh, who are opinion leaders, who have the ability to shape public opinion, of course, namely we have, can I say, the incumbent US President Donald Trump. Actually, unfortunately, were one of those people who actually was responsible for posting a lot of either false or misleading stuff online. And obviously that's quite worrying, diba? So ang nangyari, I think one of the studies, I think in a matter of like 1,000, in a matter of 1,331 days, he actually posted 23,000 false or misleading statements, mostly on Twitter. I mean, can you imagine those numbers, right? That's very worrying, because he is the president. Whatever your opinion or my personal opinion about him might be, he is the president of arguably still the most powerful country in the world. And so if he posts, and if these statements, and if it gets retweeted, right, nagkakaroon siya ng power to form opinion, to shape public opinion. And again, at this time of pandemic, that is very dangerous. So just some of the things that Trump said, which was eventually proven to be false, is that this virus supposedly dies in warm climates. Obviously, this is not true. I am based in Indonesia now, in Jakarta, very warm here. We have a lot of coronavirus cases. Same is true in the Philippines. So obviously, wala po siyang kinalaman sa weather. He also said something about, mabibigla na lang kayo. One day, biglang mawawala na lang tong coronavirus na to. False assurance, I think. There was this statement, I think, that was credited to him, na parang sinabi niya daw na dapat na we can drink bleach to kill the virus. To be fair to him, that was not true. He did not say that exact statement. He didn't actually say in Twitter or where else na dapat uminom ng bleach ang mga tao. To be fair, he didn't really say that, right? So you have all these information and statements out there, and when you see it, maybe in your feed in Facebook, whether or not it's true, maybe you think it's funny, so you share it, or maybe you think it's like shocking that he said that, so you share it. Pero dapat, yun nga, dapat we have to take responsibility that there is power in sharing. It's not as benign as we think it is, because maybe para sa'yo, alam mo nang hindi totoo, pero shinare mo kasi natawa ka, and you thought that, people wouldn't believe this. They would also just laugh at this. But that's not necessarily always true, and we cannot control kind of like yung domino or multiplier effect ng sinishare natin. Kasi for example, ang intention ng kunang naman ay i-share siya sa 5 friends ko in my group in Facebook. But then they might share it to their other friends and their other friends, and again, so on and so forth. So we have to kind of take that into consideration. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's talk about like the devolution of the gatekeeper role. Ano ba to? Ano ba yung gatekeeper? Tsaka ano ba yung devolution? So traditionally kasi, when I was studying mass communication, I graduated in 2006. So at that time, yes, of course, my internet na, pero it wasn't the digital media wasn't as prevalent as it is now. I mean, this is a whole another creature, which I admit I wasn't necessarily trained for. But at that time, when we were studying communication theories, we said, we emphasized the gatekeeper role of the media, which is a very complex role. Pero in this particular discussion, yung pinaka-concern lang natin is the gatekeeping means that there's a specific standard for information value. If you are a legitimate media practitioner, you can't just publish any content. There's a process to it. There are editors, right? So for example, if I'm a news writer, I will do my research. Obviously, I have to make sure that my research is valid. It's based on information that is legitimate. And for example, if I'm interviewing, dapat my interviewees are legitimate sources of information. I write my news, my desk editor edits it, then maybe it goes to the news editor, maybe then to the associate editor, then the editor in chief, then the publisher. Ang daming process. Before that gets published, right? Because there is obviously backlash to the news organization if they publish something that is false or misleading, diba? So they could close down, people will stop buying or reading their news, or they could face libel and things like that. Those conditions are still true today, obviously, but like I said before, there is a devolution, meaning um hindi na yan siya exclusive domain ngayon ng media practitioners, kasi all of us now are content producers as well as content consumers. And so unfortunately, hindi na sila lang ang gatekeeper. Everybody now has to play the gatekeeper role. We have to be, I think before, in the traditional media, I think we can fairly expect that like any kind of information that is published, or at least we want to say maybe a lot of the information that is published out there is vetted, is edited, is based on a certain standard. So for example, if I physically went out and bought a copy of the Philippine Daily Inquirer, then the information that is in that is vetted based on the standards of information value of PDI, right? So that much I can rely on. Now, where do I get my news? I'm gonna be, I get it largely honestly on Facebook. So the news articles that pop up on my timeline, those are usually the main articles. If I'm getting information, those are the articles that I read. And yes, a lot of those are from reputable sources, but once in a while, depending on how you curated your friends, there will be information there that are, or maybe yung information na pinost ng friend mo galing from them themselves, like maybe it's a statement from them, or any kind of claim, or kung ano man. So hindi na siya necessarily based on like a standard of information value. So now when that information reaches you, you now have the gatekeeper role. Okay, ikaw na ngayon yung, okay, so na-receive mo tang information na to, ano na ngayon? Are you gonna share it? Is it credible? Is it share worthy? What was the basis for it? Yung mga ganon. So actually, we have to have this frame of mind na kailangan nating maging critical with the information that we receive before we believe it, but also before we share it with other people, right? So this is the devolution of the gatekeeper role. Next, please. Next slide. So ito siya, guys. I don't know if you've heard about this. So apparently in Iran, 44 people in March of this year died from alcohol poisoning. Kasi there was a post in Facebook there supposedly claiming na itong bootleg na, alam niyo yung moonshine, I don't know what the local counterpart is, but like yung parang home brewed, is that the correct yung liquor na hindi siya commercial, it's not bought, like somebody made it. I think it's like sa US, uso dyan, moonshine, yung ganon. there was this there was this post that was circulated largely, I think, on Facebook in Iran, saying that if you drank this bootleg liquor, that it will help cure corona. And unfortunately, it was spread around, and a lot of people actually did try it as a remedy. And unfortunately, 44 people died from it, right? And so this is what I meant when I said, at this time of pandemic especially, it is very dangerous to not be critical of the information that we receive, because there are actual life threatening consequences to these decisions that we make, to the information that we receive, right? Next. So ito pa, this also became quite popular and shared more than hundreds of times in social media before it was debunked by Stanford University. So there was this post in Facebook, I think, that said that if you can hold your breath for 10 seconds, that actually that means that you don't have corona. So, 'di ba? So if you tried to if if you held your breath for 10 seconds, if you could do it and you had no problem doing that, um it said that it's a simple self check that we can do every morning. We take a deep breath and we hold it for more than 10 seconds. If you can completely do it without discomfort, stuffiness, or tightness, it means that you have no fibrosis in your lungs, basically indicating that you don't have the coronavirus. And it said that it was Stanford who did that study, and it was spread around a lot. And people felt that, like, oh, this is reassuring. There's this self test that we can do that doesn't require any kit, any cost, any going to the hospital or anything like that. We just hold our breath for 10 seconds and we can check if we have the corona or not. We all wish that it was that easy. Obviously, that's not true. But again, unfortunately, it was spread a lot of times before it was debunked um, by Stanford. So yan. So isa pa yun siya na example. So it's very, I don't have to go into too much about it, but I'm sure that you appreciate how dangerous that actually is. Um, yeah, according to Rose. I don't know kung nakaabot ba siya sa'yo, Rose, kung nakita mo ba tong mismo na post na to. Pero it was very popular and was shared so many times. And unfortunately, see, here's the thing. Itong retraction kasi ng news, of course, like, ayan na, so si Rose, natanggap niya din yung information na yan. At ito, this is the thing, right? So we're asking the question, bakit sobrang prevalent yung false news at this time of pandemic? Kasi here's the thing, this is unprecedented, meaning it has never happened before. We're plunged into this time of like utter darkness, and everything that's coming to us is unknown. Parang we've never had a situation before wherein the whole world is literally on pause, and the things that you just did every day, on a daily basis, go out, meet your friends, go to work, go to school, it now we can't do it. It actually endangers our lives to do it. People are afraid, understandably. And so if you offer them information, of offering them a quick way to check, if they have COVID or not, a quick way to cure themselves, drink this bootleg alcohol, you cannot blame, if there are people who would grab that opportunity or try it out, just because ayun nga, susceptible lang tao kasi takot tayo, di ba? So we need to be aware of those kind of extenuating circumstances. I mean, those factors definitely worsen the situation and push people to believe this information. So merong mga taong susceptible, merong mga taong hindi susceptible. So para sa mga tao na hindi susceptible, you have the power to stop this. You should, before it gets to people who might actually believe it, right? Next slide, please. So according to BBC, when the corona was when officially declared as a pandemic, immediately one of like the immediate responses was, there was suddenly, and again, I'm sure some of you witnessed this, suddenly there was a proliferation of ito yung pinakamagandang mask, ito yung pinakamaayos na gamot na pwede mong inumin. Pwede kang uminom nito to prevent pwede kang uminom nito to prevent yourself from getting infected with coronavirus, or etong bagong drug na to na try nila somewhere, in Mozambique or Malaysia or kung saan man, na may somebody got better there, or there's this secret gamot na ginagamit for some other disease na ayaw lang sabihin ng mga doktor, pero actually ito gamot siya for COVID. So yes, according to Paul, in the chat, yes, especially po yung mga seniors na gumagamit ng social media, ang dali po nilang naniniwala kasi syempre natatakot din po silang magkasakit. Again, like I said, very understandable. Natakot ang mga tao. Takot tayo. I'm sure, some of you takot kayo. So when people are afraid, right, they become susceptible. And we have to be aware of this. And we have to protect those who are susceptible by being responsible when we're sharing with information. And in fact, so itong nangyari na to, this was really one of the main problems that a lot of police enforcers all over the world had to deal with. They had to track down and do crackdowns and confiscate yung mga lalo na with the advent of online selling. So mas madali yung nagiging distribution ng mga false medicines and false cures. So isa siya sa mga sa nangyari. Excuse me. Next. So there's also the idea of echo chambers. So I'm sure you've heard of this before, or maybe you haven't, right? So ano ba tong echo chamber? So I'm not gonna lie, I'm guilty of this as well. So because when in 2016, I think it really heightened, last presidential election, biglang nagkaroon ng sobrang laking political divide in the Philippines, where there are the so-called Dilawans and the DDS, and away araw-araw. And I think this pushed people to kind of create echo chambers, meaning we kind of got rid of toxic people, as we labeled them, para mas peaceful yung mga timelines natin sa Facebook, for example. So what this does, though, is that it creates an echo chamber. So meaning you are surrounded with people whose opinions are parallel or quite similar to yours. And either we have all successfully eliminated any person in our circle who might have differing opinions, or we have put them to sobrang minimum para yes, para minus ingay, diba? Which I'm not gonna fault you for that, because peace of mind is so important, right? If we want to go to social media because it's our place to relax, syempre ayaw natin yung namimili tayo, diba? Ayaw na natin ng ingay, ayaw na natin ng gulo, right? Yes, Rahim, thank you. But there is a downside to that, because when we have echo chambers, it means that we are not allowing ourselves counter perspectives on issues. So for example, I don't know if this is a very good example, but if you're a flat earther, ibig sabihin isa kang tao na naniniwala na ang mundo ay flat, it's likely that you're gonna seek people who believe similarly as you. And so you're gonna create groups in WhatsApp and exchange information about bakit nga ba talaga flat ang earth, or mga evidence na flat ang earth, ganon. Or on Facebook, may group kayo, yung ganon. So ang mayari dyan, there's going to be confirmation bias. So mariri-enforce yung mga belief mo. And even if there are counter evidence na hindi yan siya totoo, merong ibang proof, there's other evidence, there's other perspectives from other people saying otherwise, because you live in an echo chamber, it's less likely that those kinds of information will reach you. Yeah, correct. Thank you, Bea. So people looking for some form of validation of their beliefs. So kung ano man yung paniniwala mo, syempre, understandably, gusto mo na merong mga tao, or you belong to a group or a network where people agree with you or confirm that belief, and there's validation in that, and I understand that, which, like I said, to an extent, I'm guilty of this as well. However, we must acknowledge the danger of that, right? So unfortunately, there are still people, for example, these days, who believe that COVID is not true, or at least it's not as bad as the media portrays it, and they kind of move around in circles of people who believe more or less the same thing, and this is dangerous, right? Because there's always new information coming, and we need to be open to that. And yes, we may feel that we are right, but let's admit we can't always be right. There are some things na hindi siguro hindi pinaka-accurate yung opinion natin for that particular issues. We have to try and be open-minded and not be trapped in our echo chambers. And so what happens now is kasi if you go out of your echo chamber, you find yourself in a situation where there's so much contrasting, information coming from everywhere, and it's just ang ingay, alam mo yon. So like at the start of the pandemic, there was like, oh, hindi pwedeng, wag kayong gumamit ng mask. It doesn't make a difference. And then later on, oh, gumamit kayo ng masks. Tapos, 'di ba? So there's so many contrasting information, contradicting information na oh, sabi ng expert ganito, oh, hindi pala, sabi naman ng ibang news outlet. So nagkakagulo. Syempre, you understand people, they become confused. The other thing is that, again, when we're plunged into this kind of situation, this pandemic, one of the overwhelming things that we feel obviously is fear. And when we're afraid, we tend to be mistrustful, again, understandably. And when we are mistrustful, we tend to not believe people just because we want to protect ourselves, right? And again, it's worsened with fake news. Kasi with the prevalence of fake news, it confirms, 'di ba? Na parang tama nga pala, wag talaga na lang ako maniwala sa news. Kasi tingnan mo to, ang daming hindi totoo na kumakalat, yung ganun, diba? So, yes, that's right, Bea. So Bea was sharing some thoughts about echo chamber. That's true, right? So, what this creates is fear and distrust. And when people are mistrustful, what they do is that they rely on heuristics or rules of thumb. What does this mean? Okay, ang daming nangyayari. Ang daming mga sinasabi ng mga iba't ibang tao. So anong gagawin ko? What are people likely to do? What they're gonna do is they're gonna go back to what they know and what they trust and what is familiar to them. And what are these? Mga remedies, mga so we have here from Lawanen. I think being right is not important right now. What's important is that we are kind and empathic to each other, or we display empathy. Totoo talaga. Which is what I'm trying to say. Let's understand where people are coming from. People are afraid, and when people are afraid, they tend to say certain things or believe certain things. And so what this does, what fear does is that it drives people to distrust the media and even experts, right? And so what they do is they seek the familiar, the tested, and so they self-medicate, tulad ng mga Iranians who actually ended up drinking bootleg alcohol and unfortunately harmed themselves very, very seriously. And again, as you know, it led to fatality. So self-medication, alternative treatments, right? Kasi ito traditional, tried and trusted sa family ko or from mga word of mouth. Yung tito ko sabi niya it worked for him. Yung friend ko ganito, it worked for them. So I would rather believe them. They're familiar. I know them, right? So not to take away from your titos and your friends, kasi pwede din naman na totoo talaga yung mga experience nila. Pero my point is that there is this pattern of us not believing the experts and instead going for yun nga, yung ano yung familiar sa atin, what makes more sense to us, right? And sometimes, because we are so afraid, what we do is we downplay the severity of the dangers. We say, okay, fine, alam mo, sige, totoo na may COVID, pero it's not as bad as people, because it's not as bad as people say it is, like what Bea is saying, because we want it to be more manageable, to be less scary. So we say, okay, fine, it's true, but it's not as bad as they say. Or we go back to parang superstitions, and or home remedies, yung mga ganon. And again, I don't have to go into so much about it. I showed you examples before. This is dangerous. You cannot, you shouldn't be drinking bleach. You shouldn't be drinking alcohol, in thinking that this will cure COVID. Kasi hindi po siya totoo. Okay? Next slide. Thank you sa mga nagko-contribute sa chat. Salamat naman. Kasi actually on my end, hindi ko nakikita po yung mga itsura niyo. So, it's nice that there are people who are responding. Next slide, please. Ano ba next slide nito? Let's see. Can I do it? There you go. Okay. So, one of the things actually that I wanna point out, that's true. Toxic positivity is dangerous. Is our memes, because memes are like the currency of the internet right now. Parang we all speak in memes, we all express each other we all express ourselves to each other in memes. Everybody uses memes, and there's a lot of memes with regards to corona, and memes, they seem very benign and harmless, and I would like to think that for the most part they are, but not always. So even the sharing of the meme, I think we have to think about that a bit. Like for example, me and the squad trying to catch the coronavirus so we can skip work. Nakakatawa siya kasi, well, I think they mean they're trying to parang double meaning na, oh, we mean we're drinking corona, we don't mean the actual virus, pero it could also obviously may ganun din siya na implicit na meaning, diba? And for me, ito yung interpretation ko nito, which you might not agree with, is this is dangerous because it downplays the severity of corona as if it is something that you can just get para lang hindi ka makapasok sa trabaho. I think that's dangerous to do that, to think that, right? Ito naman, when the Chinese student starts coughing. So, actually, hindi ko masyadong gets yung mga references. I mean, I know the references there, the cartoons, but I don't know if some of those references are lost to me. But may parang racism flavor tong meme na to na I don't really agree with, right? Obviously, as you guys know, one of the backlash of the pandemic is that there was a strong xenophobia and maybe racism towards the Chinese or the Chinese looking, unfortunately. I don't think we should ever actually attribute any kind of disease to any specific group of people, because we all know that that is not true and that is not fair. But unfortunately, these are one of those messages that unfortunately spread that or reinforce that. Ito naman, coronavirus can be killed by alcohol. Adults, kids, guess I'll die. Yeah. So yun nga, ito parang idea na ang alcohol ay gamot sa corona ay hindi po totoo. Yes, also there are people who say instead of calling it COVID-19, they call it Wuhan virus or they call it the Chinese virus, which while we understand, right? A while back, sabi ni Lawanan na dapat we should be empathetic and we should be kinder to each other. I think this is one of those areas where we can practice that. Hindi natin kailangan magalit sa mga Chinese, but also hindi din natin kailangan magalit sa mga tao who call it the Chinese virus. We just need to understand why that's happening and then also not contribute to that, right? Kasi nga takot sila. And when we are afraid, we need somebody to blame, I think. And I think that's really one of the reasons why nangyayari siya. So, sorry, I'm accidentally clicking the slides. So, ano yung takeaway natin from this one? I think first is that we need to understand that we have the power to stop or curtail misinformation and disinformation. One of the things that I think maybe we feel at the face of all this fake news prevalence ng fake news is sometimes we feel that we don't have any power or any control. Na parang we're being manipulated by the media. We're being manipulated by these social media platforms. And I'm not going to say that is a complete lie, but you have the power. You do have the power to stop or curtail. Yes, it is. Knowledge is power. To stop or curtail mis and disinformation. You are not completely powerless, not at all, right? you have the power to believe and not to believe things. You have the power to know more about something. You have the power to be critical, and to evaluate and to judge and to have conversations with people who know more than you so you can learn. For example, like eto, nandito kayo ngayon, nakikinig kayo sa akin, kunwari, ang dami ko ding alam. No? Hindi naman. Of course, I do have some expertise to share, but the point is that maraming tao na pwede natin kausapin to have conversations with so that we can be more informed. And because yes, information is power, knowledge is power, information is empowering, and we do have the power to control, what affects us and how it affects us. So do not feel powerless because you are not powerless. Um, and that also we need to know and trust that there are credible sources of information out there. We just need to find them. Don't feel na parang lahat na lang talaga mali at lahat na lang talaga are intending to manipulate you or scam you into buying something or doing something. Yes, they exist, but that's not true. Para lang tao, 'di ba? Para lang love, 'di ba? May mga para sa iyo, may mga hindi para sa iyo. You just need to know which is which, right? Um yes, fact checking definitely goes into a long way. Hi Gab. And then also platforms like the social media are neither evil nor benign. We because I think I hear a lot of people na parang um sige, suggest daw ng ibang paraan ng fact checking. Sige, I think I think defeatist na attitude, yung idea na parang media is out to get us, social media is evil, Facebook is evil. I think it overlooks the fact that these platforms are neither. They're not evil, they're not also good per se. It's up to you how you use them. They can be a force for evil, they can be a force for good, depending on how you use them. Because we cannot also overlook the many, many, many good things that have come from social media. The fact that there have been entire countries that have been freed from abusive dictators because of online movements, that have been conducted in social media. Or a lot of women have been empowered to tell their story and protect other women from being abused by sexual predators, like the Me Too movement, or the fact that now so many people are involved with like the fight against climate change, right? Things like that. We cannot ignore that there are good things, great things that come from social media. Yes, it can be a dangerous place as well, but a lot of it is really up to us and how we use it. So one thing, alternative po, kasi sabi ni Rahim na napapagod na siya from fact checking. So isang bagay na pwede niyo pong gawin is to have opinion leaders. Ano po yung opinion leaders? These are people whose judgment we trust and whose expertise is, we know to be true na expert talaga sila. So, pwedeng mga teachers siguro natin or kahit yung mga friends natin na alam natin, I trust this person. He's responsible, he's knowledgeable. And we surround ourselves with those people. Kasi at least, diba, hindi na every time na parang every single time na we come across a certain bit of information, kailangan i-analyze natin. At least if I trust a person, if there are opinion leaders in my community, pwedeng parents natin, diba, we trust their character, we trust where they're coming from, we trust their expertise. We can rely on their opinion, and that informs ours constructively, positively. Of course, we also have to be vigilant, critical, and aware. Pero ano ba ibig sabihin yan? So, eto po, I just wanted to share this, going back. I wanted to share this website. Ano po siya? This is Mythbusters from WHO. So magandang website po to. Parang what you can basically, kasi WHO and CDC, they keep coming up with list of parang mythbuster list with regards to corona, kasi nga ang daming mga false information about corona. So it's one site that you can, nasan ba yung chat? It's one site that we can go to para we can be more informed of ano ba talaga ang totoo at hindi totoo when it comes to for a moment, when it comes to corona. So ito po yung link to the website. All right, so Um, I think there was one more slide there, but what that slide was, yeah, okay, thank you. The last one was you can triangulate. What this means po is that don't just believe, don't just refer to one source, especially if something is controversial or difficult to believe, or if meron pong serious na consequences on believing a piece of information, then maybe you want to triangulate it, meaning more than one source have to confirm, at least three independent sources confirming the same thing before nyo paniwalaan na totoo yun. Vary your sources. Don't just believe sources from one place like puro US or puro, yung parang, puro BBC lang or puro Fox lang or puro Straight Times from Singapore or puro PDI or puro Rappler. You have to vary your sources para aware tayo ng different framing and different perspectives. Be aware of framing. So framing means na intentionally or unintentionally may bias po yung mga organizations, whether it's corporate or maybe they're left-leaning or right-leaning, or they just have a certain way of packaging something, right? Like for example, if I'm for smoking, if I think that smoking is a good thing, then I will say that it's a psychological outlet. It's a vital psychological outlet for me. But if I'm against smoking, I'm gonna say it's a cancer stick. Yung mga ganon, use of language. It will portray one thing different ways, right? And lastly, please use updated information. Dapat aware po tayo nito kasi especially now in a time of corona, the value of information changes depending on when it was published. So we have to make sure that it's updated. So, and to be fair, corporations such as Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, Reddit have actually pledged to have parang fact checking into their algorithms, into their designs, into their system. So I don't know if you noticed, but recently kapag ka nag-share ka ng something, may lumalabas na parang this is COVID related. Make sure that it's true or real or whatever. Or they will also tell you na parang, are you sure you want to share this? This was last updated 8 months ago or 2 years ago. So hindi na to recent. So at least may ganun din na effort yung mga corporations at mga organizations to help us limit, if not stop altogether, the effects of misinformation and disinformation. So yun na po, ito na po yung end ng talk natin. I hope that you guys learned something. And if you want to ask questions, please go ahead and do so. This is your time to shine. This is the time for you to ask your questions.
Okay, let's start the Q&A. Actually, since wala pang questions, ma'am, let's ask. I have a question. Kasi di ba, citizens tayo ng online community. Do you think that we have, as members of the online community, we have a collective responsibility to dismantle our own echo chambers? Like, responsibility mo siya as a social media citizen. Kasi, yeah, to make this conversation more productive.
Yeah. I think kasi, at the risk of sounding hypocritical, kasi nga I am to an extent, guilty of creating my own echo chamber. I think yes, I would, dare say yes, we do have the responsibility. Not everybody agrees that we do. Not everybody would say that that's a fair thing to say. But I think if you want to have opinions, have them for sure. Kahit na anong gusto mong paniwalaan, go for it. However, it depends, may limit yung opinion mo. If you keep it to yourself, if you act on it, like you use it as basis for voting, for example, or shaping voting, for example, it's fine, However, if you put it out there, and it has the potential to affect other people, whether positively or negatively, therein lies your responsibility. So, dahil tayo will live in a world where we don't keep our ideas to ourselves. Let's be honest, we don't keep our thoughts to ourselves. I don't know why, but there's this, there's this motivation, constant motivation for us to share and put it out there in social media. And because that is a culture that we have, together with that, let's say, the convenience of that, the power of being able to shape other people's opinions comes with, ano ba sabi ni Spider-Man? It comes with, thank you, Bea, with the responsibility. It comes with the responsibility to be careful. And part of that responsibility is to listen to other people. And unfortunately, having echo chambers does limit our ability to be able to listen to all sides of an issue, to have different perspectives, or to even have other people contradict us, and challenge us. I understand na stressful yan siya, pero pwede naman siguro na pwede naman siguro na walang violence involved. Yung nag-usap lang, hindi nag-aaway. Pwede naman siguro na ganun, di ba? Thank you,
Yeah.
Gab. Yeah.
Okay. May question tayo, ma'am. Should there be a harsher law, especially on creating fake news? How would it be imposed?
Okay, thank you for the question. Kasi the problem kasi with the digital media ngayon and the parang exponential sort of popularity is hindi legislatively prepared ang mga countries on how to deal with it. So like I mentioned before, in traditional media, mas defined siya. Parang may mga laws, tapos clear yung laws, tapos alam, like ako at the time as a media practitioner when I was practicing journalism, it was clear to us ano yung pwede mong gawin, ano yung hindi mo pwedeng gawin, ano yung pwede mong sabihin, pwede mong isulat at hindi mo pwedeng isulat. Clear, sobrang clear siya. Pero ngayon na we're playing a different ball game altogether. It's social media, and the borders, like the geographical borders are like, and maybe even entirely moved completely. So even jurisdictions are problematic. So because of that, nahihirapan ng mga governments na mag-impose at mag-implement, right? So I think that should there be laws against it? I think other countries do have them. I think yes, there should be. But the question really is not so much, should there be? Because yes, definitely there should be. I think the question really is more about implementation. Can they be implemented? And unfortunately, not that easily, is the truth of it. So that's why I appreciate projects like this, kasi what we can do is empower the individual. If the government's power is limited in ability to curtail or regulate this, then it's up to us as the users, as the individuals, to try and do something about it. Thank you for the question.
Wait, okay. Um, let's look for more questions, ah. So, walang nag-a-ask. Ano to? Mga natatakot ba to sa'yo, ma'am? Let's reflections kaya. Reflections. Rahim, ano yung mga pinaka natutunan mo tonight, Rahim? Uy, before that before we entertain one more question, just to answer that question, there are efforts to actually legalize the yung law against yung criminalization of fake news. Nag-propose si Senator Joel Villanueva. I think that was around 2016 yata yun, sometime around those years. Tapos it actually got a lot of criticism kasi marami siyang mga clauses na blurry. Yung standards niya of what actually constitutes public fear. Kasi if the post constitutes public fear, it's instigating public harm, it could actually be used to target certain factions, certain groups. So I'm not sure if it was actually if it was pushed through kasi ang daming criticism and it was not actually legislated as much. Pero yes, there are efforts to legalize the penalization of fake news.
Yes. So there are definitely efforts, diba? Parang may mga cybercrime laws, mga ganun. May question ito, like, what is your suggestion of being a responsible member of the online community? And then also, the question before about harsher law. So I'm sharing this link if you guys want to read it. So this is actually an effort in Taiwan. They were able to successfully, I guess maybe arguably, but they were able to successfully come up with a way to combat fake news. And this is interesting because it's government initiated. So ang ginawa nila, the first step was actually they created a digital minister. So basically, branch siya ng department na specifically designed to deal with this, and the fact that, this predominance of like not fake media, but like digital media. So there's a branch of government dedicated for it. And ang isang ginawa ng agencies, they created an app which they made available to the citizens. And now these citizens, 90% apparently of the Taiwanese citizens, use this app, and it actually helps them fact check and check the veracity of the information that they receive. So of course I don't know the technical how they do that or how the app does that, but apparently, at least according to this article from foreignpolicy.com, it's actually effective. So the point is that meron tayong models of societies and governments who have successfully done a government initiated policy which helps citizens you know be more protected against misinformation and disinformation. Gab, siguro last question na lang. Parang generally beyond fake news daw and coronavirus, paano daw to be a responsible member of the online community? So
Okay.
again, I'm not really gonna say something, I don't know, groundbreaking here, kasi I think all of these stuff we probably already know or have heard from someone else. Pero I think at the end of the day, yun nga, if you choose to become a member of the online responsibility, it comes with a responsibility, right? If you choose to become a member of the online community, it comes with a responsibility. If you don't want the responsibility, then don't be a part of the community. The reason why there is a responsibility is because what you do and say and post and share online affects other people, and therein lies the limit to our individual freedom, diba? Kapag gumawa tayo ng isang bagay that can potentially harm other people, then we have the responsibility to be careful, right? Pero yun nga, so yun yung dapat nating isipin, that our actions, even if you say, oh, but this is my personal Facebook account, this is my personal Twitter account. Yes, we understand, but there is a social contract, there is an exchange, and there is a limit. Just because personal mo yan siya. And again, this is not everybody can agree with me, diba? Kasi I think a lot of people will say that's not true. You should be able to say anything you want online. It's your account. But like I said, especially when it comes to like sharing articles and spreading information about things that can and will affect people, potentially negatively, there is a responsibility. So siguro to be a responsible member is to be aware of this. Is to be aware of it, to be aware of this as I don't know, maybe it's stressful to say all the time, pero really I think that's really how it should be. And I think if we practice it that way, parang nagiging natural na lang siya, mas nagiging careful tayo, 'di ba? Mas nagiging conscious tayo, mas nagiging intentional tayo sa mga ginagawa natin online.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Mamara. Actually, just to
Thank
add
you,
with
Gab.
that, there are efforts actually done by the Guardian. It's called the Wisdom of the Crowd. They actually let the crowd contribute to the review of public documents, and it actually proved to be effective. Kasi they were actually able to outsource the fact checking of public documents, yung mga declarations of public accounts ng mga officials. So I do think that's also one valuable option to explore. It would be good if you guys would actually research on the Guardian's effort, yung sa wisdom of the crowd. But I'm gonna be talking about that more tomorrow, like general efforts about fake news and fact checking from all over the world. Because I'm gonna be the instructor for tomorrow, and that's gonna be the last session, guys. So for tonight, let's just all give Mara a virtual clap. Thank you, Mamara, for gracing us tonight with your time. I know you're so busy with your schoolwork, with debate work, and everything else. So thank you for helping our SK leaders have some enlightenment on disinformation at the time of COVID. So everyone, I hope you're gonna have a great rest tonight, because I'm gonna stress you out tomorrow. We'll be talking about Break the Fake movement, our efforts, disinformation efforts in general all over the world, and how can you guys actually contribute to moving the discourse a little bit further pa, okay, as youth leaders, as community mobilizers. So enjoy the rest of the night. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Miss
Gab.
Mara. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Miss Mara.
Thank you.
We hope we can watch you more often. Thank you. So
Thank
insightful.
you.